Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lore You Know, episode 15, Shelzar Part 2, because we just didn't get it all fit into last episode. I'm here with
Those are
Sarah
great.
Stewart, my awesome cohort and co host, and we're going to talk about more the modern
The
history of Shelzar as opposed to.
less history
It,
than the the
yeah,
the, the rest of it.
Yeah, modern day. If you want to know
Modern day,
about
yeah.
the founding of Shelzar and all of the history that has led up to today, go back and watch episode 14. So, Sarah, where do you want to start?
Well, so basically, I kind of to prep for this. So last time we did chapter 2. Now I'm gonna do like the rest of the book.
I mean,
Basically,
chapter
of
2 is a
this book.
large chunk of
Chapter
the
2
book.
was huge. Chapter 2 was huge. So I'm gonna kind of gloss over the rest of it. But I'm thinking it's talking about the city in general. And kind of what it's like to run there as a GM, to play there as a player, and just some of the more interesting locations and characters and setting sense that you have and concepts and names for things and
Yeah,
whatnot. So I don't know if we want to start. I think we'll start with the city itself, and
sure.
then go through the different districts, and then beyond that, talk about maybe if we have time, talk about some of the surrounding areas outside the city, and then the maybe some of the NPCs. Um, and we'll touch upon the major NPCs anyway as I go
Cool.
through the districts. So
And if you're watching, you
um,
look at the map.
yeah,
I mean, the city is
yeah,
huge. It
city's
is one
massive.
of the largest, if not the largest, city on Ghelspad. It's also the
Yeah,
oldest. Again, go back and watch the previous episode. But
yeah.
if you look at, I mean, this thing is massive, and it has different districts, and there's it's kind of hard to see on the map, but there's this old wall that kind of goes through it.
You
Do you want
can
to start
you
there? Do you want to zoom
zoom
in?
in on?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if you have the district map. My my computer, the map's like over there, which is I'm looking over there. Um, camera there, map there.
And by zoom in,
Um,
I guess it does not want to let me zoom in.
yeah, because there's like I've got about 5 maps of this city.
Yeah.
There's although some of the maps I have aren't very good. Because there's some maps that came with for free with the Story Vault con content downloads. There's a
Ah.
district map, but instead of based on color, it's these lines, which are kind of hard to read because it's like parallel lines, diagonal lines, slightly less diagonal lines that are right next to
Oh,
each other. And
I know what you
I
mean. Okay, gotcha.
I can't read that map for beans, but the one that's in color in the book, in the black and white book, is basically shades of gray, which clearly I think was originally in color, but it doesn't help that the book is printed in black and white,
Yeah,
and
yeah. They when
so
they
it's like
did their grayscale conversion for the black and white
it
printing, it was not the cleanest.
kind of fails, yeah. So the maps of shells aren't that great, and this map, it's on page 51 in the original 3.0 book, is just brutally hard to read. But but anyway, I do have it laid out, and the city's pretty amazing. It's technically has 10 districts, which is just that's alone to really point out how big this city is. And these aren't like little like, oh, this district is 2 streets. This is like, as I said last time, I think Shelzar is technically bigger than Waterdeep. Um, I mean, it depends on like your perspective and how you run it and whatever. But miles wise, Waterdeep is maybe larger, but Shelzar's denser, and these districts are pretty heavy.
Yeah.
It reminds me of anything of that old city from Thieves World, which I wouldn't be surprised if they drew from. Remember the old Thieves World books that came out in the, like
I know what you're talking about, but I don't know the name of the city.
yeah, I don't remember the name of the city. Someone viewing, remind me what the Thieves World city was called. Um, anyway, I was heavy into that, and like when I was a kid, I was like, this is where I want to play the role playing games when I'm, you know, allowed. So I never ran in Thieves World, but it certainly influenced a lot of what I have run. And some of like Freeport. I don't know if you're familiar with that D&D setting, Freeport.
Hmm.
Shelzar reminds me of that as well, but it's like Freeport is like a tiny piece of Shelzar.
Yeah,
You know, 'cause
yeah.
there's
Some
a
of the
section of Shelzar
districts in
very important.
Shelzar are large enough
Yeah.
to be at least small towns on their own.
Exactly. It's just so big. I guess we'll go through the districts.
There we go.
Starting in
Found it.
I'm kind of going in the order they are in the chapter 1 of the book. It's just how I wrote them down because they were convenient. The but probably the oldest district in the city is called Old Town. Starting from there, which is in this kind of center region, northern part of the city. It's not the oldest thing in the city because there's some really ancient structures that are so old they don't know how old they are. But it's certainly, in terms of the city that is called Shelzar, in terms of that, this would be the oldest section of the city. So it's kind of it's within so there's two walls. Starting with that. There's the wall that's really evident on the map, that big wall on the western side of the city. You can see those big towers on the big dots. But inside the city is another wall, which I don't know if it's frustrating because the outer wall has sections that are older than anything,
Right.
but the inner wall is technically older in terms of the wall of Shelzar, because the original city of Shelzar was just within that inner wall, and some of the outer wall is just old stuff, but it was eventually built as the city expanded out to that area, and then they built the rest of the outer wall and the rest of the gates.
And now,
But as we said
I don't
before,
know if I
Shelzar's
can. If I go over
old.
here, yeah. So Old Gate.
Yeah, if you can zoom.
Where it won't let me zoom. I don't know what's going on.
Well,
But
that's fine. Well,
if you can see,
Old Town is that section along the top where you see some docks. It doesn't actually reach the old wall.
yeah,
It's just along the inner wall. So as I said, it's the original Hazari settlement. So we talked about the Hazari before as those ascetic, anti-hedonism people who originally founded the area before the Achilles folks came in. And that was where they had their original settlement. Those original docks are out there today, in Shelzar. This is basically where the seat of government is. High Minister Fratrelli's home is there. The district has its own docks, but they're not the shipping area. Basically, these northern docks are for the elite to have their yachts, effectively.
right.
So it's not a shipping dock area, unless it's like the private shipping that this one rich dude has. But in general, it's where the elite will have their private vessels and all of their stuff. And the city council seats here, and there's one shrine here, which is interesting. The only Denev's shrine is in Old Town, and I think it's probably really a testament to how old she would be, because back in the day of the Zari, she was like, they all worship only the Titans, not the gods. So hers was probably the only Titanic shrine they hadn't ripped down. So that's where you'd find the shrine to Denev would be here. And the biggest road, or the most important road, I should say, through Shelzar runs through here, which is Inkeeli's Way. Lots of things, unsurprisingly, are named after Inkeeli in Shelzar. No surprise. So it is their city, as we say. And then the inner city wall kind of separates it from the west, but otherwise just streets pretty much wide streets separate the various districts. So heading south from Old Town is what's called the Merchants' Quarter, which is, I think, fascinating because it's not where the markets actually are.
Right.
Well, it's where the markets certainly used to be.
Yeah.
When Shelzar was smaller. But there's markets everywhere. So to say this is like the market district would be really, and this isn't even where the biggest markets are. So it would be a misnomer. It's more where the merchants have their bases, like House Asheros would have its HQ there, and major warehouses would be there. There's a location there. I think I love it, called the Merchants Souk. Souk, Souk.
Yep.
All the markets are called souks. So there's the souk, which is
Right.
the mega market, which is the huge market, and which is in a different district. But there's these little pop-up like farmers markets kind of level of markets throughout every district in the city. Specifically in the merchants district, they have the merchant sook, and I describe this as like the Costco of the sooks,
Absolutely.
because it's not
Right.
it's not where the for the regular folk, not that regular folks do go to Costco, but it's not where the regular folks go, it's where the merchants go to buy their stuff to sell in the other markets. So
Right.
that's basically the wholesale market.
Yeah.
So you're like, you don't go there to buy a shirt, you go there to buy
100
like,
shirts too.
yeah, well, 100 reams of silk to
Right.
make shirts with, and or where you'd buy like a whole flock of sheep or whatever. You'd go here in the merchant sook to get stuff in bulk. So, like, unless you were building a palace
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
needed like a ton of wood or something like that, you probably wouldn't go here unless you needed, like, maybe a restaurant owner would go like, I need a ton of flour. They might go here, but in general, this is where the merchants go to buy in bulk, which I thought was kind of neat. Um, Also of note, in Merchants Quarter, this is where you find the Calastian embassy, which I thought was cool.
Which is
There's
newish, right?
which is
Like,
newish,
I,
very new,
I
very
don't
very
remember
new,
how long ago that, but I
like
feel like this is
a
within
few years ago.
years. Yeah.
Within years, yeah. Because the Calastians were pretty much shut out of Shelzar beyond, like, I mean, it's not Shelzar doesn't have a Cold War with the Calastians like New Veneer does. They're not actively against them, and Calastia, as we talked about a few episodes ago, is like, no, we're not invading Shelzar because it's way too important and we'd screw it up. So they know better because they learned that from history. It's like, don't mess with this economy that works really well. But they've set up this embassy of recent years, and it's kind of a mystery because, like, theology wise, you can't get more opposite of Shelzar pretty much than the Calastians and their worship of Chardoon. So, and certainly, only Hadrada and Chardoon are like this kind of aesthetic. I keep saying that word wrong. Not aesthetics, ascetic. This is opposite of Sheldar's thing. Hadrada has a place because the old Hazari folks are still around, but Chardoon never really had an inn until this embassy was allowed to open. Chardoon's inn was like basically like, okay, we got a shrine to him in the megachurch because we have shrines to everybody in the megachurch, but but other than that, we don't agree with any of their philosophies. Really against them, and certainly against that going to conquer everything. Not that, no, that's not true because they were part of the Empire of Elves, which was going to conquer everything. But you know what I mean. The like theologically, morally, they're really opposed.
Yeah.
So opening an embassy to Calastia is kind of weird. And the fact that the major backer was the High Priestess of Inkili,
Super weird.
who was like super weird. Like, what are they up to? That they back this and we're like, yeah, we want an embassy to Calastia, to keep a closer eye on them. I don't know.
Yeah.
Keep your friends close, your enemies closer.
And just in case you hadn't watched episode 14, Inkili is like the patron deity of Shelzar, and it is at least rumored. I would say it's never been proven, but it's at least rumored that Inkili has shown up throughout history and walked around the streets and affected literally the outcome of history for the city. Like, it's possible Shelzar would not be the way it is today without Inkili having walked its streets. And so for its main, cleric, the speaker of Inkili in the city, to be like, yeah, let's let the Calastians in, is such a weird thing.
Oh, a lot of potential plot there, and it's not explained in these books, so
Right.
it's kind of really up to us as GMs and creators to decide why Aishayla, the High Priestess, decided this and what's going on there. And I may be tapping into that in future books if Through Shadows and Dreams haven't decided. Probably actually not going to go there because the books aren't really about that.
Yeah.
But would touch on it certainly. But I don't know. I don't even have a headcanon for why she did that. Like, you've heard my thousands of headcanons, and I
Yeah.
don't have one for this, beyond keeping enemies closer or just some means of knowing their politics.
Right.
Or some, like, maybe fighting unknown Titan issues with them and having a joint effort there. I don't know. I don't know why she would do that, but yeah, I don't think, or they, I should say, why they would do that. But I don't imagine Aishela has like a hidden motive of having the Calastians take over Shelzar. I'm not suspecting that for sure.
I couldn't see it.
That doesn't make sense.
Again, it's up to the DM, but
yeah, it's up to the DM. But Aishela certainly speaks for Inkili, and so if anyone wants it there, it's Inkili.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
There is a.
Which is very interesting.
I have this like thought in the back of my mind when I think about it, because when things get stagnant, sometimes it is best to just burn them down and start over. And there's this like little bit in my head that I'm like, Inkili's kind of all over the place. Like, she is or they are a goddess of chaos, and
yeah,
reaping chaos is what they do. So there's this little bit of me that's just like, maybe she's there to just mess things up.
or seed in like doubt in the Calastians by talking to them, communicating. I don't know, maybe that'd be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, that would fit anything that I think. It's like, Gilly told me to. Why? Because Gilly has plans. long term plans. Right. Yeah, so maybe that's it. Anyway, so that's a location that's in the Merchant's Quarter. So if you run that and be like, we're gonna go to the Calastian Embassy, that's where you would go, the Merchant's Quarter, which is just south of Old Town. So continuing south central area would be south of the Merchant's Quarter, and basically smack dab in the middle of the city is what's called the Foreign Quarter, and it hugs the old inner wall of the city, on the south side, and the south and the west sides, it early days when Shelzar was founded, like time. This is back when it was still part of the Empire of Elves. Basically, foreigners, i.e., non-Elzens, who visited would be like, "You're going to stay here in this section of town, and there's a curfew. You're not allowed to wander the streets at night. You must stay here at night and don't mess about." Go back when they were kind of had more strict laws. So it was basically like Chinatown kind of thing in that regard, back in the day. Not so much now. Now it's just like, this is an area where some people live. Some of the older locations are here. Certainly the buildings are older than a lot of the other areas. It's probably the smallest district in the city. I think it's the smallest district in the city. Places of note, the constabulary office is here. So, which is interesting because it's run by a Corianite, a follower of Corian, so lawful good, which is interesting because, your head of the cops is lawful good, which I think is pretty funny. And in the city of chaotic neutral, right, the head of police is lawful good.
Someone has to be the voice of reason. It doesn't mean you have to listen to them.
Yeah. So a Corian follower runs that. There's also one of the more noted brothels. I'm only going to mention, there's freaking probably thousands of brothels in Shelzar. Right. I'm only going to mention a couple of the more interesting ones because I cannot possibly talk about. They're in this book mentioned. I think there's a dozen brothels mentioned in this book, basically. I may be exaggerating, but only like a little.
Right.
So I'm only going to talk about a couple of them. But I do want to mention this one because I found it interesting. It's called the Calastian Love Brothel, which I thought was funny because, again, Calastian Shelzar is the opposite. And apparently not apparently, but it's just brothels described. It is the brothel where gay sex is celebrated. And it's basically a gay brothel. Not to say there aren't other gay brothels in Shelzar, but this is exclusively gay brothel. Like other brothels will be like, you have a choice, or you can do lots of things. This one, it's like, nope, this is it. Dudes with dudes, women with women, that is it, And so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And the implication calling it the Calastian love brothel is just
Right.
mocking the Calastians, who not as uptight as the followers of Hadrada would be
Right.
in Hadrad, where it's not even legal. It is legal in Calastia, but it's certainly not the norm and certainly frowned upon. Given when we talked about Calastia, the response to having gay king, and they're like, no, we cannot have a gay king or a lesbian king. So certainly not frowned upon and considering a taboo, Calastia. So they named, of course, the gay brothel after Calastia. So I think that's funny, and it's totally ironically named, and nobody who works there worships Chardoon,
Right.
or is Calastian in any way. So they just called it that because they were being ironic. And they want to just pick on the Calastians. So yeah, you're all gay. You're gonna come to our brothel,
who
right?
doesn't want to pick on the besides Calastians?
So
who doesn't?
Who doesn't? Yeah, exactly. Also in the foreign quarter, you would find the Temple of Nemorga, which I thought was interesting. Not a god who's followed very much there, but certainly would be involved in any funereal rites that occur in Shelzar. Would probably involve Nemorga's priesthood, and that's where you would go.
Yeah.
In the foreign quarter. All right, now moving on from now, we've kind of done the central hub now, so I'm gonna head east corner of the map, to the North Docks, which are not the North Docks. I think like the North Docks are not the North Docks. The North Docks are in the Old Town. The North Docks are in the northeast corner, but not where the docks that are in the north are. Not to be confusing, but which I think is actually very appropriate, because if you've been in any city anywhere, things are misnamed and mislabeled and confusing. So I love that confusion of in Shelzar, the fact that the North Docks are they're technically north-ish, but they're not certainly in the North Docks. So this was the original port in the city. So still within that inner wall where the original city was. Today, it's mostly cargo, passenger ships, and what are pleasure barges for the elite, because it's a smaller port, smaller series of docks than the other South Docks are. This is one of the more posher areas. This is where you find the really fancy restaurants, expensive entertainment, theaters, art galleries, coffee houses, tea houses. The discrete social vices are found in the North Docks district, and I think that's interesting. That sort of like it's okay to be here. This is also where the Honorable Brotherhood of Sailors and Pilots Guild can be found, i.e., for the snooty sailors, as opposed to the pirates. This is
the sailors who walk around with their pinky up.
Yeah. The snooty sailors belong to this guild. Like I think, or quote, the legitimate sailors.
That's fair. Yeah.
Would be in this guild. Not where you'd find your pirates and privateers and fishing boats and Joe Schmo, but the big merchant ships would be here. There's also an orphanage here, Amaz. So you find the children without parents would be in that little place in the North Docks. So like if you're like, I have a character who's an orphan in Shelzar, they may have grown up there. So there's a spot for some character background, which is why I mentioned it. So moving on, south of that, hugging the coast, you have the South Docks, which is huge. It's like probably the third largest district in Shelzar is the South Docks. This looks more like your classic medieval, well, not medieval so much, but your classic D&D port. This is the section that will look like Freeport. This is the section that will look like your typical, imagine, like Pirates of the Caribbean Tortuga feel vibe. If you're gonna play around with that imagery,
Right.
this is South Docks is it. This is where the biggest docks are. This is where the biggest ships come in. This is where you'll find your expected fare, where you're gonna find the tattoo parlors and the flop houses and the as I said, there's brothels everywhere, but there's brothels, the seedier brothels,
Yeah.
not the seediest brothels, but the seedier brothels. Um, um, and basically North Docks and South Docks are separated by that wall, that inner wall I was talking about. Um, that's what cuts those two areas off pretty much. This is where you'd find the harbor master's office is in the South Docks. The shrine of Manawe, the goddess of the sea, is here, unsurprisingly, as most worshippers of Manawe would probably go here most of the time. And a lot of sailors. She's probably the second or third most worshipped goddess in Shelzar, certainly. As a lot of the sailors will come to her shrine before heading out to sea and
Please don't sink my boat.
ask her for, yes, please don't sink my boat, and help me find good fish, or whatever it is they're doing. So she's very popular among the sailors. And another cool location here is the Paladins of Corian have like a tiny fort here. This little sad, very sad fort. I adore these guys. I absolutely, I totally use these guys when I play around Shelzar, because they're like these evangelical Corian followers who don't have a prayer of converting anyone in this city.
But they're still out there with their flyers.
And they're not like crazy like door to door evangelicals. They're just like, they're really nice, and they're out to just help people, and they're like come to people, like, we'll help you, and they're just really kind and trying to defend people and being very paladin-y, you know. But no one gives a shit about these guys. Basically, Mithril, you know, the first location we talked about, sent like this division of Corianic knights to Shelzar like 30 years ago or something. I don't know how long ago it was exactly. It probably says in the book. It was a while ago, and they set up this little base, this little tiny fort, little building basically, and it's just a stone building, and it's incredibly well defended. Sadly enough, it's like, if something happened, this would be a great place to go for safety. Just this handful of Corianic knights are there, like, we're trying to do good in Las Vegas, and it's really hard. So they're cute. I adore them. I adore the little paladins there. Anyway, moving on. I actually gotta look at my map where the next district is. For whatever reason, this skips the biggest two districts. Yeah. Okay. So go all the way up to the west end of the city. Now, so we're gonna kind of zoom across the city. To what is either the biggest or second biggest district, the Shadi. This pretty much hugs the entire outer wall of the city in like a big curve. The northern part of it borders on Old Town, and the rest of it borders on a district I haven't talked about yet, but kind of hugs it like a C. And this is where all of the major gates that come into the city go through the Shadi. This is pretty much not the slums. We'll get to that later, but the working poor, like your worker bees, live here. That used to be like centuries ago when slavery was legal, which it is not anymore. When it was legal, this is where the slaves were quartered. So a lot of those old buildings were renovated by, you know, the working poor here. And this is where you'd find your the folks that, like, your dock workers and your carpenters and your roofers and your farmers or the farm workers, I should say, laborers. This is where the laborers are. So they're poor, but they're not beggars. They're, you know, just one notch up on the social rung. What was really interesting is, because this district is basically, you go through this district to get to anywhere, just about, unless you're coming in by ship. at one point, like about 10, 20 years ago, the Lord decided to spruce it up quite a bit, and they came in and painted it riotously with these crazy colors, and
Right.
they shined at everything, and they put lipstick on this pig, and they painted in these glorious bright colors. So it kind of gives me a Mexico City vibe, or some of those places in Mexico that with that feel of like kind of ramshackly buildings, but really brightly colored.
Yeah.
Some people have kept it up, if they could, but a lot of it's kind of worn down and the paint's faded in a lot of areas because the city certainly hasn't invested into keeping it up. So unless individuals like, I'm proud of my pink building or blue building or whatever, but it generally is a brighter area than say the South Docks would be, and people tend to be more festive here, and they don't have a lot, but what they have, they do. And Shelzar, as a region, being known for its colorful dyes and mixtures and paints, they can be acquired pretty cheaply. And I just kind of picture this area like maybe the paint in the buildings has faded a bit, but I bet people have like bright colored cloths or flags or whatever hanging up in the area, because it just screams that kind of vibe
Yeah.
to me. And bright colored cloths is super cheap in Shelzar to get.
And because it
But
is
anyway, it's
so
supposed to
hot
be,
down here, I always envision like this area just has like
yeah.
awnings
Yeah,
covering, like, you have
exactly.
your buildings and then the streets are just like awnings. And so you're just walking
Yeah.
through like this area that's like super brightly colored, including all of those awnings would just be like almost painful to look at if you ever like
Yeah,
zoomed
exactly,
out
exactly.
and look at it.
Yeah, and this is where this is not the tourist district. This is where you're gonna find the everyman, despite the fact that you have to walk through here to get to the nicer areas of the city.
Right.
Um, this is where you'll find shrines to kind of the gods who aren't followed quite as closely. Hadrada, Madriel, Drandari, those shrines are in this district. Um, the tax offices is here, which I was amused by. I guess they collect taxes mostly from the poor people. And but what's most interesting is all of the gates. And there's these various gates that run through the shoddy. And I didn't actually take notes on this section because it was just easier um just to sorry, my phone is ringing. Go away. Just to write it down. Um just to read it out of the book, sorry. Then write it down. So because there's a lot of them. And I lost my page. Okay, here we go. So going kind of from the north along the wall, there's this series of about 7 gates. The first one, which I think is most interesting, is the Old Gate. It's arguably the oldest structure in Shelzar, and it's argues with one other big structure. I'll talk about later. It's interesting because it's freaking massive. It's like 30 feet tall.
Yeah.
Or 25 feet tall. Okay, not quite 30 feet. 25 feet tall, which is pretty big. Especially for a gate. City gates, what are you talking? 10, 20, 25 feet is pretty big. And it's really, really, really well built in a way that they're like kind of surprised by
Yeah.
like how long it's lasted. And they don't know who built it, and it was there when the Hazari first showed up, and it's just always been there as far as anyone knows. So it's this mystery origin, and that's kind of neat. So for your archaeologist gaming fans, this could be an interesting set piece. The Old Gate. So it's super impressive. It seems to be like made for giant people. And there's some, if you dig deep in some of the Scarredlands lore, there is this implication that one of the first sentient races during the epoch of Gulthaga were actually giants. So the idea that this was built by giants is kind of neat.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that idea, although that would make this gate tens of thousands of years old.
Yeah.
So it'd be pretty big. Why
They
it hasn't
just don't build
collapsed?
them like they used to.
They don't. And this gate was apparently very well built. And the walls around it, the other gates are obviously way newer. And this is primarily where folks who come from Zathiski come, because it's kind of on that road from the Shelzar here. Hope from Zakitsky would come there and take that road. Not that you can tell by this tiny map behind my head, but so Old Gate. Next one going around is the Padaway, Padaweh Padaweh Gate. More the Hazari, those ascetic. I always say that word wrong. You correct me, Jeremy. Followers.
I'm just gonna let you go with it.
Yeah, found this gate holy. This is also where the Shelzar University is by this gate. So Center of Learning is here, and yeah, there's a lot more details about it. I'm not gonna go into all of that, but yeah, so it's kind of the university gate, so the students would come in this way, I guess. Next one is in Keeley's Gate, which is probably the most used gate, or until recently is the primary gate, until an even newer gate was recently constructed. But and it's sort of the spiritual followers of Keeley would flock here and use this gate. It's interesting that you think of a city, blows me away. You think of a city like usually you'd have like, all right, we've got maybe 4 gates, northeast, southwest. This is like this giant wall, and these gates are like every, I don't know, they're not even a mile apart.
Right.
And there's like a ton of them. So it's kind of interesting. So why would you favor? I mean, if you're coming from a specific direction, of course, if you're coming from the northeast, you'd take the northern gate, like I said. But why would you come to these other gates? It's kind of interesting. What is going on? All the phones are ringing. So yeah, Keeley's Gate. Got a lot of traffic. Was considered holy for the followers of Keeley, and kind of reminds everyone that this is his city. There's so many things named after in Keeley. Not a big surprise. Next one down is Newgate, obviously named because it's relatively new.
Right.
Actually, it's super new. There was a firestorm that blew in from the sweltering fields, that caused all sorts of nasty damage to the wall, and they just were like, rather than fully repairing the wall, they're just like, we'll just stick a new gate here.
Yeah.
And like build wall around it, because it's easier. So they hired a bunch of dwarves and they built a new gate, and then they fixed the wall and patched the wall around it.
I mean, there's a big hole. Why not just make a new gate instead of patching it up?
Yeah, and it's this massive thing. It's apparently easier to open and close than any of the other gates. So maybe that's why it's so popular. They paid craftsmen from all the way from Barak Torn to come and build this thing for them. So pretty cool. Next one down is Hadrada's Gate, which is kind of weird. Antithesis of Inkili has a gate not 2 gates away from Inkili's Gate. And in fact, they were next to each other for the longest time until the new gate was built. Maybe that's why they built the new gate, just to separate the two of them.
Just need that
I don't know.
division there.
But obviously, Hadradans use this one because they feel weird about going through Inkili's Gate. I don't know. And there is a shrine to Hadrada just through this gate. So there we go. I don't know who else uses it. I don't think it's a very popular one. Then going down, there's this gate called Belsmith's Gate, which I think is neat because there's no visible gate here.
Right.
And I love this location, and I will use this location. I have and will use this location. It's just a wall. Like most people don't even know about it, or when they do, they're like, well, there's a section of wall they call Belsmith's Gate, but we don't know why because there's no gate there. But unbeknownst to most people, there is an entryway there that is used almost exclusively by the Cult of the Ancients, the Belsmith's Assassins. And you basically have to scale the wall, which, assassins are generally pretty good at doing.
Right.
And then there's the secret door, which, like, DC search of impossible. Like, seriously, if you don't know it's there,
right,
you will not find it. Like, you need, and this is old 3.5 rules, which admittedly, we're talking high. They gave it a DC of 35.
And I'd just leave it there for 5th edition because no one's going to
I would just leave it there for 5th edition 35 because it's like, holy shit, impossible.
Right.
If you know it's there, you know it's there. If you don't know it's there, you will not find it. Because DC 35 is like you either roll a 20. Are you even allowed if you roll a 20? Are you?
I mean, it's not an
Is it an
automatic. You
auto
still
success?
need a
I
plus
don't think it's an auto.
15 to find it.
Yeah, I don't think it's an auto success on a
Uh-uh.
20
Mm-mm.
anymore. So you would literally have to have a investigate skill of 15
Yeah.
and roll a 20, or just use knock, I guess. I don't know. Or one of those spells that lets you find secret doors.
Right.
So short of magic, short of really low level magic, this is impossible. Fine. But in addition to that, it basically goes into this narrow chimney, so you have to climb your way down it. And said chimney is full of traps, like just packed with deadly devices and traps. And if you have signed Belsmith's book, Black Book of Assassins, you can just slide down this thing and be fine. You know, you have to make the climb check, but other than that, you're fine. If you have not signed Belsmith's book, good luck surviving
Right.
through this gauntlet of death. And then when you get to the bottom, there's like a half a dozen assassins there, just standing there going, "You know the password?"
Right.
And then they will stab you. So it's like basically Cult of the Ancients are about the only people who have a chance of finding it, using it, or anything with that little entrance way. So I think that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, cultists using this one. And then finally, the last one is the Beggar's Gate, which is the southernmost gate, which pretty much it's the little tip of that area. I don't even know if this is technically in the Shoddy. At this point, we're almost in the next district. It's technically in the Shoddy, which is barely. And it's unlike all the other gates, which is grandiose, giant. You bring them. This is like a door.
Yeah.
like tall people have to stoop. It's just a little door. It's like, this is the back entrance, the trade entrance, where we threw out the trash. I don't know. Yeah, and in fact, yeah, it's only one person. Horses or vehicles can't possibly get through this. And there's a little shanty town that's built up outside of it for people who can't even afford to live in the city.
Yeah.
So there's a little beggar's town outside of Beggar's Gate. So that's kind of neat. And those are the gates. So like I said, I didn't bother writing those down. Pull that from the book. Yeah. Moving on. I gotta go back to the other map because it's easier to read. Other map. Here it is. Next. Nope, that's not it. It's not helpful. Sorry. There's a lot of maps.
There are.
Oh. Ugh. I was gonna go to the Adazi district. It's east of the Shoddy, and borders to the north borders the Merchant district and the Foreign Quarter. Moderately sized district. This one is basically the homes of the in-between people. So the poor's in the Shoddy, you've got the rich people in the old town. This is the lesser merchants, foreign expatriates, ex-adventurers. So it's a middle class,
Yeah.
in so much as Shelzar has one, live here. And there really isn't anything more to say about it.
Yeah.
There's a couple of locations listed, but it's probably the smallest description of any of these locations. So
I will
it's
say that if you watch the Curiosity Cache on Fridays after this show, that's where the shop is set up, is in the Adazi.
Is in the Adazi district.
Yeah.
The nondescript district.
Yeah.
Really. Okay, moving from there, there's the Sook, which is kind of pretty central, north. It's between the docks. It's north of the South Dock, but that's the only connects to two districts, which is kind of interesting given that it's central. It's north of the South Docks and connects to the South Docks, but other than that, is completely surrounded by the Maze district, which I'll get to in a bit, which I thought was kind of fascinating. So, and it's basically this ginormous open air market.
Yeah.
So we talked about the souk as a market, and there's souks everywhere. There's the souk with a
Yeah.
capital S
Yeah.
and a capital T.
If anyone's ever talking about the souk, this is the one they're
This
talking
is
about.
it's the souk.
Right.
Yeah, which is it's basically the market in the middle of the maze, but it's so big it's considered its own district. And it's this massive open air market. Lots of vendors there. If you want to go shopping in Shelzar, buy the crazy stuff.
Yeah.
This is the place to go. This is pretty much the where you're gonna find like your magic shops and all of the crazy things. And we say like what do we have? But it's primarily open. Although it's primarily an open air market with little vending booths.
Yeah.
Other major locations to note is this is also where the shrine of there's not a really major place. There is a shrine of Enkili here, not the temple of Enkili, but a shrine of Enkili. It is only noted because every merchant who has a shop in the souk will swing by there and ask for a little blessing.
Yeah.
And it's a big enough shrine. It's not just a little hole in the wall. It's a pretty big shrine, and they do a lot of business in that shrine. So contracts and other kind of legal documents get signed here a lot. So so when you're running your games and whatnot, and you're like, oh, we're gonna go to the market and buy a thing, but we have to get a contract signed or whatever. It's like, oh, they're gonna hire us to be merchant. They will go to the shrine to get your documents signed, and that's where the notary would be basically.
Right.
Would be at the Keeley shrine. So the way I look at it. So that's kind of the bulk of what's in here.
Yeah. There's one thing I want to throw out there because I just thought it was really fascinating. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I remember it, so Shelzar does not really, they don't dislike wizards, but they don't really embrace wizardry. They are a sorcerer culture. Yeah. And so wizards you can't just like go to a magic shop and get all of your components and everything. And the souk is like there's like one guy who has like a wizard magic shop set up for you to go buy all your stuff at. And I was just like, it's such a interesting cultural idea that in a world rife with magic,
high magic,
like
Scarredlands has, I would say, higher magic than your typical WotC realms like Faerun or Greyhawk or whatever.
That this is like the one place that the wizards all just like, okay, well, I got to go shopping today, heading down to the souk because I got to walk across town to get the things I need. There aren't like, Oh,
this is Dark Raven's Magical Emporium?
I think so.
Yeah. I liked him because he was a character. And not just a character, but a character, kind of interesting guy. And he's got a whole wonderful little backstory. He's right next to a weaponsmith shop, Hugh McHugh's weaponsmith, and they're right near each other. And these are old buddies who used to adventure together back in the day. And they retired to Shelzar and opened their own shops, respective shops. So this dwarven weaponsmith who used to hang out with this human wizard. And and you're totally right. This is one of the only places you can go. Like, if you want to get your spell components, you're like, I have to go to that place and get the sulfur, and I have to go to that place and get the crystal, and I have to go to that place. This is like, we got it all.
Your one-stop shopping. Right.
But the only place in Shelzar that you're going to do the one-stop shopping. Otherwise, you're like
going all over. Right.
Going all over all day trying to find each little spell component. So he's got it all. Also, where you'd buy like scrolls and magic items.
Your spell book, all of those things.
Your spell book, yeah. But you're right about Shelzar being kind of like the wizards.
Yeah.
They don't have a school of wizardry.
Right.
And there's so many other places in Ghelspad where you'd find a school of wizardry. There's like 9 of them or something.
Yeah.
And there isn't one. The largest city in the continent, you'd expect one, and there isn't.
Right. Yeah, just the cultural history has been so much about sorcery. And in 5th edition, I would say you can lean into warlock magic here.
Yeah, certainly.
But it definitely wasn't a part of 3rd edition, so the lore isn't there. But I mean, I can see very simply, Jin patrons and stuff
Oh
being
yeah.
pretty heavy duty down here.
Oh yeah. And for the comment on that, Scarlands, even the 3.5 books came out early in the 3.5 era, so warlocks pretty much introduced at the tail end of the Scarlands. So
Right.
there isn't any material on for warlocks. Just like for the same reason there isn't any material on tieflings or Ganassi or
Yeah.
any of those later races that were introduced. So can you play those in Scarlands? There's certainly you can GM that and figure out the rules for that,
Yeah.
but you're not gonna run into, you know, your standard warlock tiefling
Right. Right.
in Greyhawk is not gonna run around. You're not gonna necessarily see them in Scarlands unless you're, you know, you're not gonna necessarily find them in the book, but you could certainly create one and come up with a reasoning for why there's a warlock tiefling, but
Yeah.
but it's not a usual thing.
Yeah.
So
In fact, if you're looking for patrons that are kind of made for Scarred Lands, check out the Slurration Vault on Drive Through RPG and the Ghelspad Companions, I think is what they're called. There's several really interesting patrons in there that are more sculpted for the concept of Scarred Lands than like the Great Old One and the Fiend and all that. Those also work,
yeah,
but these
can
these make a little bit more sense.
yeah, because like the fiend, sure that works. You can just be like, oh, my patron's is some devil or demon that
Right.
created by Chardoon or Vangal or Bellsmith, but the Fae and Otherworld
Yeah.
patrons are just they don't map. There
Yeah.
aren't really great Fae, and there aren't there aren't really anything. Scarlands doesn't have Eldritch.
Yeah.
We're actually there was actually a discussion about this off time. We were way off topic, but that's okay. They talk about the Slaracians being kind of eldritch, but I actually disagree and don't think of the Slaracians as they're unearthly,
Yeah.
but they're not Cthulhu-y.
Right.
They're not old god. They're not because they're the Titans are the old gods.
Yeah.
If anything's eldritch on Skarn, it's the Titans
Absolutely.
themselves.
Yeah. If you were doing
And
patrons, the Titans make the most sense.
Titans make total sense. And especially since all but one of them are still alive. They're
Right.
just entombed somewhere.
Yeah.
So for like the mind of Lethina to get into somebody's head, totally feasible.
Yeah.
Totally feasible.
I mean, Kadum.
Or any of
Is it Kadum? The
Kadum,
one who's
certainly.
the one who made the Blood Sea. Kadum.
Kadum.
Yeah.
Kadum,
So
yeah.
he's absolutely
I pronounce it.
yeah.
Kadum.
He's absolutely Cthulhu because he's resting
Oh.
at the bottom of this ocean, just waiting for someone to come wake him up.
If Cthulhu was Godzilla.
Right. Right. I have that T-shirt. I mean,
so
but
like
anyway,
that's
yeah.
why I was like arguing. It's like Thracians aren't eldritch, so they were like, oh, the old gods map the Thracians. It's like I don't really think they do. I think it maps more to the Titans.
Yeah.
The Thracians are just an explanation. They're not just an explanation. They're like the root of a lot of things in Scarlands, but they're more in that psionics
Right.
bucket. And if we get into psionics of 5th edition more, that would be there. Anyway, that was way off topic, but yes. Dark Raven and Huma Q are some fun NPCs.
Yay!
Okay, where was I?
So that's the Sook.
That was the Sook. Okay, moving on beyond the Sook to the Maze, which is one of the after probably the second biggest district, arguably. I don't have a ruler, but it's freaking huge, and it's also called the Seven Sins, which I'm amused that they acknowledge the 7 deadly sins in Scarred Lands, which they acknowledge big time, actually, because I believe there's demons or devils literal demons and devils associated with each of the 7 deadly sins. So it's a big deal. And the maze is sprawlingly huge. It covers a giant area of Shelzar. Like it completely encompasses 3 or 4 sides of the Sook. It borders both the north and south docks. And it's kind of a big area, and all the buildings are really crunched together with tiny alleyways. There aren't very many big roadways like you see in the rest of the city, going through like the shoddy and these big giant roads coming from those main gates. The maze, very few big roads, mostly little pocket ways. Labyrinth of streets, lots of tiny alleys. you can barely get like a wagon or not a wagon, a cart or whatever through. I think it's cool.
Yeah.
And it's cut in half by that inner wall, which I think is kind of interesting. Hold on just a second.
Sure.
I gotta mute for a sec. Wow.
I could go Mystery Science Theater 3000 and just like say what she's
I
saying here, but
I just had to like quiet down whatever was happening outside of the office.
these
There
things,
was lots of noise.
I'm just waiting because I know I have an Amazon delivery coming today. I'm waiting for my dog to just go crazy. So if that happens, I'll disappear for a second. But
Okay, yeah. So sorry about that. I was like, somebody's literally talking like right outside my office door. I'm like, they can probably pick you up. But that's fine. Anyway, where was I? The maze.
Yep.
So pretty cool area. I think a lot of plot happens here, and this is where I think of when I think of like Thieves Guild or those old books, Thieves Roll books, and Ankh-Morpork. I think of the maze. You know, it just these cramped little buildings and little maybe cobbled streets,
Right.
and it's there's this gully that runs through it, and they get these like kind of monsoons in the summertime a lot, and it will flood, and it'll just be gross, and then like raw sewage runs down the street for a week, as the summer floods happen.
Right.
But this is also kind of the most important district in the city as well. This is where Keely's massive shrine temple is. I mentioned there was Keely shrine. There's tons of shrines to Keely. Like every district has a shrine to Keely, but this is where the mega temple is. Like there is a grand temple which we haven't gotten to yet, but this for all the gods. But this is Keely's temple, and it's bigger than the grand temple. It's one of probably the biggest building in Shelzar is in Keely's temple. It's just huge, and this is where Shayla would be found, and all of that, and it's right in the maze, which is like so. To me, the maze is more Shelzar than anywhere.
Yeah.
You also find Goran's shrine and Arias's shrine, Temple of Idra is here. Other places of note. One of my favorite locales in all Shelzar, Belsmith's Bliss. Everybody talks about Belsmith's Bliss, which is it's just a brothel, right? No big deal. It's just a brothel with like 4 named NPCs, and and it's the entranceway to the Cult of the Ancients. Assassin's Guild for Belsmith is like purported, actually, underneath this brothel. That's one of the main ways you get into the Cult of the Ancients underground lair is through that the brothel. But it is a legitimate brothel. Like there isn't just a cover for the Assassin's Guild. It's also a thing. It was founded by a woman who is a former retired assassin. She's like in her 50s. She's a pretty interesting character, and she's got these just phenomenally awesome orc bouncers. We're just like, we will make sure nothing bad happens, and they stomp around looking all scary looking.
Is that Jasmine?
I love this location.
Is Jasmine the one who founded it? Am I remembering that right? Jasmine Shatai?
That sounds right. I need to check that. Jasmine Shatai, yes, manager of Belsmith's Bliss.
I've got art for that.
I love her. I love her a lot. And yeah, she's got her 2 mooks. Are they mentioned in here? The 2 orcs. Mr. Or was that something? I think it was from here. Mr. Joy and Mr.
Something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, it's their names are funny.
Yeah. I don't see it in here, but they've got funny names. Mr. Joy and Mr. something sounding like Joy, and they're both orcs. And something to note, in the Thracian Vaults, Travis did a book on Shelzar, converting a bunch of this stuff to 5th edition. And he did convert Jasmine and her 2 mooks.
Nice.
Part of this, and actually made one of them. They're both orcs, but made one half orc, half elf, which I thought was pretty neat. Because we have the new half elf, half orc rules,
Options,
so not
right?
to necessarily combine those two, but that you can be a half orc, half anything, or a half elf, half anything. So you can be a dwarf if you want. So he converted one of the two bouncers into a half elf, half orc. So
That's
I thought it was
fun.
pretty neat.
Yeah.
And it kind of differentiates the two of them, makes it a little bit different, because they're not supposed to be like twins or anything. But I just like those characters and that whole vibe around that. So if you want to, that book on the vault only covers like a handful of key locations,
Yeah.
but it's still a pretty good resource if you want to run Shelzar in 5th edition.
Absolutely.
I do highly recommend picking it up. It's pretty cheap. So there's that. And then other places of note in the maze, I was amused by a location called the Silver Twilight Gambling Club, if for no other reason than its connection with Call of Cthulhu. It's like, Shelzar has its own Silver Twilight Lodge. Other than the name, I don't think there's any Cthulhu connection.
That's fair. Yeah.
But I was amused by that. I'm gonna actually double check the description to make sure I didn't miss an obvious, like, and they worship the Thracians there or something like that. But so anyway, thought that was interesting. So you can check out that there. Final district, the Pezwahri, Pezwahri. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Pezwahri. This is kind of in the southern central section. It includes the little island right off the shore, Ismarhi Island. And this is basically where all the rich bastards live. Like, seriously. It is where it's full of ridiculously high-walled private estates. It's sort of it's almost kind of outside the city, even though it's surrounded by the city on 3 ways and beached on the 4th. Maze butts against one section, the 4 1/4 northern section, and the Adazi in the west, but it's still kind of very much for its own district. Of note, the Grand Temple that I mentioned before is here. So there's a big temple called the 8-sided Great Wheel, where there's 8 sections, which each has a shrine to one of the 8 victor gods, and in the middle is a little shrine to Deneth. None of the demigods are mentioned here, of course, just the victor gods. But this is the only place you're going to find a shrine to Vangel in all of Shelzar.
Totally fair.
Knowledge. Vangel and Tanel, this is their only presence, is in this temple. There's also the fortress, which is this big stone building is here, which is where the army is located, which at this point are basically just the city, the gate guards, because Shelzar doesn't really have much of an army since the war. The High Minister, his house is here. He works in Old Town, but this is where his shiny mansion is. And the other thing of note that I adore is this place called the Menagerie, which is basically a zoo, which I think is cool. And it certainly rivals the zoo we talked about in Leone. Well, for no other reason than it's like a lot older. And there's a whole big deal in this book about how they have an actual, honest to God, dragon, like traditional dragon, not Brack dragon, in the zoo, and he's probably one of the only dragons on Ghelspad. But grew up in captivity because they found a black dragon egg. It's basically this black dragon in a cage that has somehow not escaped. But because of how he was brought up, doesn't speak Draconic, and is like basically treated like an animal. So he's kind of used to being like an animal, and by being sentient is like really it's just sad. It's just like kind of this sad, like dragon in a cage. It's just super sad. And there's a great plot in the at the end of the book about various things you can run, and the obvious one is the dragon gets out. It's like the first plot of the book. for adventures is, and the dragon gets out.
And it'd be easy to
But
also tie in that Calastian group
that
that's
was,
there.
yeah,
Because
I
Verduk
was
is
about to say
just
that.
like, they've got a black dragon. I need to have the black dragon. Oh my god.
Exactly. Verduk calls himself the Black Dragon.
Right?
His standard is a black dragon.
Right.
Like, he would totally want a black dragon pet or at his command or whatever. Tell me he doesn't want that dragon. Come on. It's the only known black dragon,
Right?
like, in the known world. You'd have to get, Tanneroth is a myth. So, yeah, it's pretty awesome. So, I mean, the menagerie's there. And they've got a bunch of other critters there, too. Like, you'll find this, like, there's the basilisk over there, and there's the whatever, various critters in the menagerie. Fortress menagerie. Oh, and then of other weird things to note, so I mentioned there's an island, Ismarhi Island, where the really, really rich people live. I think it's not visible on the big map, but and what's cool is there's this bridge that connects mainland to the island called the Alabaster Bridge. And it's the other oldest piece of architecture, along with the old gate in Shelzar. Again, thousands of year old, don't know who constructed it, unbreakable, kind of magic. It looks like it was made of a single alabaster stone, and it's basically a central pillar that goes down into the water, and a bridge that encompasses it, that runs across it. It doesn't technically even connect to the land and the island. They've built things up to connect it so you can walk on it, but it doesn't adhere or link to those places. It stands free on its own with only the central pillar holding it up, and it's just arching bridge. So it's just cool, magical, weird thing that, again, if you're doing like kind of an archaeology kind of thing, there's this concept, which is, I think, pretty neat. And there's like a little bit like legends around that. And there's this weird ancient writing written on the side of it, and they don't know where it's from, and that's kind of, and you can do all sorts of creative stuff with that. This is the kind of the district.
Yeah.
Well, no, there's one more district that isn't technically a district, but I think it's worth mentioning, which is the underground. So the 11th district of Shelzar, which encompasses nearly the entire city, as Shelzar is built upon a city that was built upon a city that was built upon a city. So there's layers, and I live outside Seattle, so I'm familiar with the concept of city built on city. Seattle literally has a bottom floor underneath because of the way Seattle was built. So I kind of picture the underground of Shelzar similar to that, except a lot bigger. And it's full of crypts and tunnels and catacombs and sewers that all interconnect in various ways. Lots of homeless people down there. Kind of the weird twisted stuff happens. So, the really kinky stuff will be underground. Not necessarily illegal, just don't tell my wife I... ... This is, the literal underground sex dungeons are going to be found here. You're going to find the illegal fighting pits and the dens of iniquity and whatnot. But it is, and all the crime and hidden things and stuff will be here. The cult of the ancients control the majority of it. So if except for some rando places with homeless people, you pretty much have to have at least some level of alliance with the cult of the ancients to wander through and use this underground highway for your purposes. If you try to, the cult will know you're there, and they will demand something. Like they'll either stab you or demand tribute. I don't know, but you better have an alliance with them if you're planning to use it for anything particular, as they do control it. So, yeah. So even though the city is in Keely's city, Belsmith's got quite the little foothold there.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I would say. It's known for the top gods are Keely, Idra, the goddess of love and sex, Manawi, the goddess of the sea. You hear about those three, but I put Belsmith right up there.
Yeah.
With Manawi and Idra in terms of popularity.
Interchangeable, yeah.
Yeah. And Keely's still on top, though. I mean, Keely's. Okay, so that's like the last district. All right, moving on. Outside the city. Or do we want to go look at that next?
Or
do we want to talk about NPCs? Or other stuff?
So we have about 15 minutes left. So what's...
I'm going to talk about other stuff then.
Sure.
Like other, yes, just some stuff of note when you're running in Shelzar. According to the book, at least, you don't have to necessarily follow the rules of this, but carrying weapons is illegal. So weapons are always peace-bound. There are massive ways to get around that, of course. You can carry daggers, so just not swords or, so you can carry daggers, but anything bigger than a dagger is not allowed. But you can peace-bond it, and then you can create... And I crashed. Okay.
I can hear you.
We knew it was going to happen.
You're frozen, but I can hear you.
You can hear me?
I can.
Oh, okay. It looks to me like...
Oh, but I think I lost you. So I'm going to keep explaining what she's talking about. So you can essentially go and pay to have a license to have a unpeace-bound weapon, and most of the time these are like guards and soldiers to an extent, but like the Calastian group that's there has probably paid this fee in order to have weapons if they're carrying them. For example, in Curiosity Cache, one of the workers is essentially the guard for the shop, and so the owner of the shop, Belky, he has paid for the license for her to be able to carry a longsword. But if you're caught with a weapon that isn't peace-bound, then there are fines and other penalties for having them. Sarah, are you back? Maybe not. All right, I'll keep going. But another way around this is there is and I'm pretty sure it's a dwarf, and I can't remember his name. He makes these peace bindings that are fraudulent, and they're like so good that you can't tell that they're not an official one, that you can essentially unhook, stab someone, slice them up, and then put your sword away and reattach the peace binding, and no one would be the wiser. So there are ways around carrying a weapon, and for the most part we're talking like bladed weapons, things that have sheaths. If you're walking around with a quarterstaff, no one's going to come up and like get you for it. Sarah, I heard something. Are you back? Maybe not.
I can see your pen. No.
I can kind of hear you talking.
Seriously? I know, it's making me log in, and my password is not...
Oh no.
In my...
Darn you, technology.
Key pass. So... Alright. Yes? Possibly? Hello?
Hello. Well, I can hear you. So what else? I was kind of explaining about the peace bindings and how to get around that. Are there any other
peace binding?
So like there was the, either just go out without one and get a fine. You can get a fraudulent one.
Or bribe the guard.
Yeah, you can bribe the guard. There's the guy who makes the fake ones that you can unhook and put back on. What else is there? I see you.
Oh, you can use spells to, they're not gonna stop you from using various spells to have weapons either. It's like we'll take your weapons away, but
right.
You can have a wizard who's like, veil of daggers.
Right.
So kind of silly, and and there's some great I don't know if there's 5e equivalents, but there's some old spells where you could have like a tattoo of a sword, and there's a Scarred Lance specific tattoo. You could have a tattoo of a sword, and they're not gonna like, oh, it's just an ordinary tattoo. What? Right. So there's a billion ways to sneak weapons into Shelzar. So, but I just think it's interesting because like you go to the main gate and they're like, no, you put your weapons in storage locker. Here's the key and the number and whatever.
And
If you're ever gonna find a gnome in Ghelspad, it'll be in Shelzar.
It's funny. The book actually says there is
There's
one gnome in
one
Shelzar.
gnome.
I broke that, and there are now two gnomes. Well, so
Two gnomes.
Belky, who owns the Curiosity Cache, is a gnome, and he's technically not there because he's missing. But yeah, two gnomes.
Yeah, the gnomes come from because there's a gnome race in Termana, and
Right.
so apparently a couple of them, and they said there's some implication that there's supposed to be more than one, but they're really rare. These weird creatures called gnomes, these jungle people.
Right.
Yeah. The food is stupid spicy, so keep that in mind.
Right.
Drugs and alcohol are totes legal, but public drunkenness is illegal.
Right.
But public druggedness, what do you call it? Drug intoxication,
Yeah.
as opposed
Yeah.
to alcohol intoxication,
Sure.
is legal.
Yeah.
So you can't be drunk, but you can be stoned in
Right.
public. So drugs are, as a result, more popular than alcohol in the city. So weed on every corner kind of thing. There's a popular game called Hago, which based on the description just sounds like Go. I was like, so it's Go with like
Right.
a different colored tile. Literacy is a big deal. Most people are literate, and the really rich people are disgustingly literate, as most of them speak many languages and read and write many languages. Marriage is exceptionally important, but fidelity is not. Just as long as you know who the parents of your babies are. Oh, and there's a cool metal called Shelzarium, which I thought this was a neat thing.
Yeah.
It's apparently it's found. They found it in some shipwrecks off the coast. These little coins in these boats, and so this is stupid rare. And it glows either green or purple.
Mm-hmm.
The ones are a little more plentiful than the purple ones, and they've used it not for coinage. They collect the coins and they break them down and they craft things with them.
Right.
So it's considered a very valuable metal. There's not nearly enough of it to make anything. Like, you can't make a sword out of this stuff. You'd have to get like almost all of it. But they use it particularly in jewelry and other fancy things. They'll use like a little piece of it and they'll be like, look what the Shelzarium metal in the locket, kind of thing.
Right.
Or whatever. And they're considered really, really valuable and rare. It basically glows, and depending on how much of it you've put into your piece, you could have like up to a 20-foot radius light source. And what's interesting is you detect magic on them, they don't show as magic, yet they will turn off in an anti-magic field. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And they're not like green. Is it green? Evergreen. It's not like evergreen where it fades after a while. It's evergreen's this glow in the dark moss. It's just a metal that glows, and it's cool. So that was a neat thing. I was like, there's a weird you can throw in there. It's like, I have a Shelzarium brooch that's worth like 500 gold because it's really rare. And what was interesting though about the coins is they have true dragons stamped on them, and they're written in a language that nobody recognizes. So I was just like, Dragonlance.
Yeah. The name Shelzarium is kind of a misnomer because I feel like they named it that because that's where they found the coins in the shipwreck, but it doesn't come from Shelzar. Like, it's not mined from
only
under
in so
the
much
city or in the area. So if you're playing and you're just like, oh, I'm going out to the Shelzarium mine, that's not a thing.
Yeah. So that's I thought it's kind of interesting. And along with those shipwrecks, there's presumably rumors of this second city under the water that may have, it's really not clear what the origins were, but just right off the coast. Like maybe part of Shelzar or the city that was the city that Shelzar was built on sunk, like, through a disaster or something like that. Who knows? But there's ruins under the bay of buildings and presumably another like parts of a city, and that's like near where they find those funky coins. So, and that's another kind of, if you're running an aquatic game, that could be a really neat thing to explore, is this underwater city ruins, and who knows what's there, and you could do some really cool stuff with that. So I think that's a neat concept. It's just like
Absolutely.
it's weird. And the city, in terms of age, is about the same era as the Alabaster Bridge and the Old Gate. Three things could certainly be connected in some kind of plot. And there's no description of what any of this is, so free reign for the GM to play around with that business.
Right.
Going back to my, you want to run an archaeologist in the ancient city of Shelzar. There's that. So that's kind of highlights beyond, just talking about the dozen or so NPCs.
Yeah.
There's certainly lots of interesting characters. They desperately need to be converted to 5th edition. Travis did convert several of them, but not all of them. So pick up his Shelzar book if you want to know more. And that book was tied into his
Sins of Shelzar game. Yeah.
Sins of Shelzar game. Yeah. So, and that's, I believe, available on YouTube. I'm gonna check that out.
It is, and they're also I think it's every other Wednesday on Twitch at Plastic Age Plays. So if you are interested in Shelzar, what's that?
Is it the same campaign, or is it? I thought they were started a new one, but maybe it's just.
So I think they're on episode 4 or 5, something like that. They're not very far into it, but they.
Oh, I'm thinking of the Drowas. I think maybe I don't know. Anyway,
it is that group that at the end they started over. Yep.
Yeah, and they went to okay. So that's available. That's a thing, and then you're running Curiosity Cache which is in Shelzar.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, my game, which does not stream, because my players are not interested in doing that. We're like a session away from going to Shelzar.
Nice. It is a great adventure location. So much possibility.
I'm running Vengeance of the Shunned, which is the other reason why I'm not bothering to stream it, because other people have streamed Vengeance of the Shunned. So
yeah,
another version of it. And we're just wrapping up to start part 4, which they go to Shelzar. Part 4. So we're just wrapping up Master Yama's blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So,
if you want a game that bounces around the entirety of Ghelspad, Vengeance of the Shunned is a fun romp around the country. So the continent.
And I do not want to run weeks of transport and running monsters, so they are totally going to be using gates, because screw that. Right? You hired a wizard,
right?
Who sent you through a teleportation circle. You're there.
Done.
Damn. I mean, I get it. Yeah. Well, I got to get them from what? Here?
Yeah.
To here?
Yeah.
Screw that.
And I think shortly thereafter you'll go back. So that's all the more fun.
Yeah.
Yay.
So we're gonna take a gate.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they eventually have to get to here. It's like, no, that's horrible. We're gonna magic that business. I don't care if they're level 4. We're gonna magic that business.
Hey, that's what hired NPCs are for.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously these old materials are all 3X area. Teleportation circle was not a spell, was not a thing. So trying to decide in the 5th edition era of where those are is, I think, an interesting challenge. Is where do you put some obviously want one in every major city, but it's interesting to be like, how does that work?
Yeah.
And we've actually come up with a
Go ahead.
I was to say to commoditize that in some fashion.
Yeah.
To be like, could you hire, again, because a lower level party or a party who's doesn't have the kind of magic, could you hire a basically a wizard to be like, can you teleport circle us?
Right.
Between Mithril and Shelzar.
Yeah.
For a price and not have to take a boat.
I feel like the concept of it is something kind of like cell phones, where in older editions you had these pagers. You could teleport, but you didn't have the tech that is now, and now they have smartphones, and so wizards have unlocked this concept of teleportation circles. So they're a newer thing in my mind.
Yeah. Well, as a GM, that was like why I hated running low level campaigns in Scarlands, because there's so many cool places, and I wanted to get my party that I didn't want to do the tromping unless tromping across the terrain was part of the plot. Like
Right.
when I ran Serpent Amphora, tromping across the terrain was actually important to the plot, so I didn't
Yeah.
want them to bamf.
Yeah.
Because you encounter important shit on the road. But in general, if I was running my own stuff, I was like, I don't care about, you know, getting from, Mithril to Bridge City. Fuck,
Right.
I just get there. And so eventually I'd be like, oh, good, you're high enough level for Windwalk or for teleport. But teleport, you had to know the place. So it was like teleport with Scry or teleport with, line, here's a description, and I actually introduced Wayfinder wizards that they could hire, whose job it was just to transport people.
Yeah.
Like a taxi
Absolutely.
cab wizard.
Love it.
And now it's like teleportation circle has saved me from that pain.
Love it.
But now it can be abused too easily. So it's like I don't
That is also
want
true.
to take away the travel log concepts of those lower level parties. So it's like,
and
how
sometimes
do you
that travel is what you
control
level
that?
up during, because you're like
Yeah,
experiencing things and you're getting that the
yeah,
experience to level up, and so that by the time you're to where you're supposed to go, you are the level you should be. So as the DM, you
yeah,
just got to plot that stuff out.
yeah. Well, milestone leveling does help. That I no longer have to
Absolutely.
keep track of how many freaking XP there were for the.
Right.
Oh,
Well,
I had charts.
nice. You're going to get this much experience, my god.
And then they would be like, I'm 100 points away. And I'm just like, seriously? Seriously?
Go kill rats.
Go
Well,
find an owlbear and
let's
just do
right.
it.
Let's do our outros. Sarah, tell us all about yourself and where
Yep.
we can all find you on the internet.
Finding the map falling on the floor. I'm Sarah Stewart. I am a co-author of Vigilant Through Shadows of Dreams Book 1, a Scarred Lands novel, and I also have a bunch of stuff on the Racine Vault, as we've said. And we'll have some more stuff soonish going up there too. Someday I'll get that Slytherin book done. It's waiting on artwork. It's
Soon,
waiting
make
on
it
artwork.
happen.
Soon. Yeah, I know. It's mostly written. It needs formatting and artwork. Like the art takes forever. Yeah, you can find me on morelikethisindustries.com. On my email is it's perfect at morelikethis.industries.com, which is a really, really long email. And you can also find me on Tumblr as Ketinas and Facebook as Sarah Stewart. And I'm not on Twitter because, okay, I'm on Twitter, but I don't use it.
Which is funny because that's what I've got under your name. More like this too.
Like this too. At Twitter, if there's a way to like poke people,
right?
I'd probably find you if you could try to find me through Twitter, but probably not. I don't know. I don't like it. It's yucky.
I completely understand.
LinkedIn is the best place, honestly, to contact me.
Nice.
Okay, I gotta do a more like this industry's LinkedIn page.
Make it happen. And I am Jeremy Hochhalter. I publish on DM's Guild and Drive Through RPG. You can find me on Twitter at WHPubs or here on Twitch or on Facebook at WH Publications. I run Curiosity Cache after this on Fridays, so we start at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. You can join both Sarah and I on Travis Legg's channel, Plastic Age Plays, on Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern for our newest show, Scarred Lands,
We're
a Family
playing Bizarre
Affair.
Siblings.
Yeah, we're all adopted siblings, so it's gonna be so much fun. And then
Yeah,
on Wednesdays, come back here for this. I'm actually playing. I'm not the DM for this. Chaz, who's in Curiosity Cache, is running Academia Chronicles of Porta Temporia. Wow, that is a mouthful.
that's
A
the thing
Final
that's
Fantasy,
Final Fantasy
14 inspired 5e actual play. Yeah, it's going to be a hoot as well. So
That sounds like fun.
we've only done one episode, but next Wednesday we'll be back. That's 3:30 Eastern. So until next time, everybody stay safe, take care of yourself and each other, and we will see you then. Bye.